Hello, and welcome to episode 48 of the Great Canadian Hockey Podcast. I'm James Parisi here with my fabulous co-host Aiden Sarah. I've never called you fabulous, but that's a new one. Probably won't happen again, but we're gonna roll with it. Here we are back again. It's beautiful outside. I am in sunny Port Alberni next to Sprout Lake. That is in BC for those people who don't know what Port Alberni is or only know it for crimes. But yeah, Aiden, how are you doing, fella? Is it sunny where you are? Are you stuck inside? What's the deal here?
It is sunny. I've got the window open behind me. Nice cool breeze rolling in. Yeah, the snow will come back soon, unfortunately.
Ew.
The weather will indeed turn on me once more pretty soon, I think. I think by the end of the week I'm going to see more snow, but I'm enjoying looking outside at green grass for now. It's funny that you mentioned that you're in Port Alberni. We had Ben Bazaran on. He was a fellow BCIT journalism and broadcast graduate, as was Lucas Celli. We've had them both on the show before. James and I started BCIT together in 2020 on Zoom. So, what we knew about each other was limited to what was said in Zoom classes, which, if you've ever been in a Zoom class in a post secondary setting, probably not much, especially not much about personal information. But
Yeah, especially considering how much of it I appeared to somewhat nap to.
well, I was gonna say that the first time I saw you actually in person, which would have been probably 6 months after school started, I knew you as James from Port Alberni because you did manage to bring that up in Zoom classes more than once. So just so everybody, as you said, oh, I don't know if everybody knows where that is. I'm like, if somebody's listened to this podcast a lot, there's no way that James being from Port Alberni isn't a known fact. Like that's just because I remember it was like three classes in and I knew that about you.
Mr. Port Alberni. That's me. That's me. Well, okay. I sounded kind of hyped about the sun coming out, but I have to admit it hasn't been as awesome as it could be because, well, exciting moment. I went golfing for the first time on Saturday.
Wow, how'd you do?
Better than I thought. I was in rough shape from a meeting with hometown friends from the evening before, and I made it through. Beautiful day, like 17 degrees out, rivers flowing through this course. Like it's really, really nice. The Cherry Creek Golf Course, I believe, in Port Alberni. It's gorgeous. But one of my friends that I went with is really good. Another one that I went with goes a lot, so he's like above average. And then the third guy that I went with, he's usually really good, but he got called into work at 6 a.m. to go do some insurance management stuff, or no, accounting management stuff. And his brain was a little tired. So he made me look good. He made me appear useful-ish. Long drives, I really struggle with those. Like getting that big smack on a long drive. I got the form down okay, but man, I cannot send that ball flying through the air like everyone else can. The one thing I really want to say though is I get it. I get why everyone likes golfing.
Oh, I don't really think there's too much to dislike about actually going golfing. Like you are walking somewhere usually very scenic and nice, usually with your friends and usually drinking a beer. Like it doesn't really seem like there's too much to complain about. I understand people who, aren't super into the sport, especially watching it on TV. It's far from the most exciting, but it will never not be at least an enjoyable time.
Well, the one thing that made it less enjoyable was of the 9 holes we did, once we got to, I believe, hole six, my spring allergies hit me like a freight train. All of a sudden, my eyes were itchy, and and to top it off, I sneezed maybe every second and a half for about 5 minutes. But believe it or not, during one of my sneezes, I hit my best first drive. So maybe the key for me being good at golf is to sneeze.
It's all about contact. Like that was, like I got better at golf when I realized that I don't need to try and hit the ball as hard as I possibly can every time I step up to it. You just need to make as good a contact between your club and the ball as you can. And that was when I got better. And better doesn't mean good, mind you, because I'm not good at golf, but I'm better than when I started, which is a low bar, but that's what I'll give myself.
Well, okay, if you're not amazing, then I do want to go with you next time you're back. I think we should go do that. Maybe go somewhere less busy because the one other downside was like it was the first beautiful day of the year. So the place was very busy. And very often we're like, you guys want to pass us? And then they're like, no, no, we're just out enjoying the day. But you still feel bad. Like you still just feel like, oh, I want to let you go.
Yeah, if you offer, I think that's one thing. You do got to make the offer though if you're in that position.
Yeah, I think we offered 3 times because it was two guys behind us who were clearly very experienced, and they were like not driving carts. They were just walking through, having a great time, and like I don't know. At times, it kind of felt like they were itching to get past us. But 3 offers and they didn't take it. Like there's, you can't feel bad after that. I guess.
No, I agree with you.
I guess that brings me to my last question with this little stutter step you're getting from the nice weather, this little fake out, do you get spring allergies a little bit now and then it backs off and then it's gonna hit you hard later?
That's exactly what's gonna happen. Yeah, like, and it's not too bad right now. I used to have it like terrible. As of even like 3, 4 years ago, it was terrible. It's steadily improved since then, which is a godsend because it was like bad, bad. But I think that that will happen. It's actually probably more than likely. It'll be it'll be a few weeks away, but it's coming. I know it's coming, and hearing you talk about yours is just making me dread it even more.
Yeah, yeah. Like the first 2 hours of my day right now is itching my eyes and sneezing and taking 2 showers. So yeah, moving on from my spring allergy hell. Um, Kind of solid piece of news came out today. Long time forward, 15-year veteran of the NHL, Wayne Simmons is hanging him up. And like, okay, before I dive into this, Aiden, what is the first thing you think of when you think Wayne Simmons?
That's a good question. It's hard not to think about. I think it was 2012 between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, that playoff series they had. That's like he was right in the mix in every which way. I also think of the I mean, I know Mike Richards won what, one Stanley Cup or two Stanley Cups? Two Stanley
Two.
Cups with LA.
Yeah, two.
Um but I still think that trade was awesome for the Philadelphia Flyers. They got Simmons and Shen. Shen was such a reliable player for them for so long, and then they end up trading him for a pair of first round picks, which was a solid return, and then Shen got to win his cup in St. Louis. But I think of Simmons's involvement in just like he was Philly for me for a long time, right? Like when I thought
Oh, totally.
Philadelphia, like I thought Danny Briere and Mike Richards in that 2010 Cup run, Jeff Carter was there. But then after that era ended, thinking Philly, like Simmons was the face, and I know Giroux was the best player, but Simmons really did feel like like the heartbeat of that team.
To me, it was Simmons and Hartnell.
Scott Hartnell, yeah. Scott Hartnell was a little bit more in that Briere Carter group.
Yeah, I mean the first thing I think of, I mean, is right there with what you're saying. I think about that trade and like they sent Mike Richards, who's pretty much a franchise player, top line center, complete package to LA, like a year after they lose in the Cup Finals, and then they get two players who together in Shen and Simmons basically created a Mike Richards. Like the combination of those two filled the void.
Yeah, Richards was like Simmons would fight, man. Like Richards never fought, but so there would I know what you mean. There was definitely a little bit extra to that package. Like I think Philly did well in that trade. Um, I know what you mean. You and I have talked about it a little bit, and Wayne Simmons doesn't fill this like this archetype what I'm describing as much as somebody else does. But the conversation that I know you and I have had, I don't know if we've had it on the podcast actually. But like NHL players who missed their quote best on best window, right? Like we haven't
Mm-hmm.
had a best on best tournament since 2016, and that means that uh, like solid NHL players will have never been able to play in a best on best tournament just because they weren't good enough for the last one and they won't be good enough for the next one, basically, right? Because you have 9 years and players' careers are going to totally go up and down in those 9 years. Wayne Simmons, if Canada goes to the 2018 Olympics, the way he'd been playing, he would have been an outside candidate to be the Brendan Morrow, right? You remember Brendan Morrow in 2010? That would have been the role that Simmons would have played. But he was going into that season when the Olympics would have been in February. He was coming off 2 30-goal seasons.
True, true.
And man, he was just, he was the most consistent of that power forward in the 2010s, I think, right? Like David Clarkson had a year. Tom Wilson, obviously, he's a little bit of a younger guy than Simmons, but Simmons was just, you knew what you were getting from him night in, night out. Went downhill after he left Philly, but he was aging by then.
Okay, I'm sorry. That totally makes me go off on a tangent, but I expect a lot of tangents this episode. Is Gabriel Landeskog not the power forward of the 2010s? If we go power forward of the decade, start to finish, I think he has to be, right?
He's there. I mean, Colorado, him winning the Stanley Cup after the 2010s might make me pause. But in terms of consistency, like the guy won the Calder Trophy, right? Like
Yep.
the year after he was drafted, he just took no time at all to make an impact in the league. And yeah, I've always been a big Landeskog fan. The thing about Landeskog that maybe would stray me from like labeling him that is just, you know, there was so much he did beyond what beyond the power forward archetype, right? Like when you think power forward, you think somebody like a Tom Wilson or a Wayne Simmons, where that is their game. They are going to it's the puck on stick, get to net kind of thing. And Landeskog was always, kind of a different kind of power forward. So he wouldn't have come to mind first, but bringing that up, I don't disagree with that. I can't think of any others that ever have accomplished as much or were as skilled as him.
I think just like the thing that would make him the power forward of the 2010s is like he started his career in 11-12 and he played up until the end of that. So, I mean, are there any of the other great power forwards of our recent memory that played 2011, 2012 until the end of the decade?
No, it's that's a fair question. And yeah, like don't forget he was also Colorado's captain like immediately too, which like I know comparing how good players are, yeah, whether or not they wear a letter isn't necessarily indicative of that, but it's worth mentioning that he was given it so young and did a good job with that responsibility.
Well, since we're on the Colorado talk, I'm gonna get this one over early because I have to rub it in your face at some point. On Wednesday, I was in Rogers Arena for Colorado's visit, and very, very, very quickly in the night, Alexander Georgiev led in two of the first three shots, and then next thing you know, Colorado's down 3-0. And I had some very, very, very rude Canucks fans in front of me, just saying the most random, obnoxious garbage and just being like terrible spectators. Like I get getting hyped up about the game and like being like a little bit of a nuisance for sure and like getting a little bit rowdy. These guys just sucked. These guys were brutal. And so when Colorado scored a goal at the end of the second period and made it 3-1, only behind by two with 20 minutes to go, I just kept saying, yep, just wait and see how we are at the end of 60. I just kept saying it over and over and over again. And what do you know? A few power plays later, a few maybe questionable calls, a few maybe bad penalty kills from Vancouver. Um, Colorado ties it. They go and win in overtime. Bam, bam, bam. I understand puck over glass is an awful penalty. Like the delay of game penalty sucks. It blows. But I mean, it's in the rule book. Colorado capitalized. I do think back, and Aiden and I mentioned the puck over glass TSN song that James Duffy and co made. Um, but like, yeah, it was a problem then, and it's somewhat a problem now. I don't really think about it often, but yeah, when Colorado eventually put a bow on it in OT, I believe it went off of Val Nichushkin's head. He eventually got credit for the goal instead of McKinnon. But great way to score a goal. Good job using your head. But yeah, I very, very, very much enjoyed seeing how deflated the idiots in front of me were. That was amazing. That was the highlight of my night.
You made a reference to that Puck Over Glass song from TSN, which is hilarious and everybody should watch it. But I actually watching that game actively thought prior to the Puck Over Glass thing of a different like old TSN reference. I'm sure you're gonna remember this. So like in the peak days of Sports Center, like early 2010s, um TSM would often have like if they were showing like a highlight package, they'd have the and I'm gonna quote TSN turning point, right? I'm remembering that correctly.
Yeah, I remember those.
So that basically was like, in retrospect, oh, this is like the big momentum shift in this game, and this, this was a huge moment. And when Mikko Rantanen scored, I swear I almost texted you saying that's the TSN turning point because it was 3-0 Vancouver and Rantanen scores with what, like 5 seconds left in the second period. And
Yeah.
then and honestly, like I'm going into that third up 3-1. Vancouver protects leads well too. Like I think that was only the second time or the third time all season that they've gone into the third period winning and lost. And I think only once was it in regulation, but um, Colorado just was a different beast that day. And then I watched Colorado play in Edmonton on Saturday, and it was another dramatic victory in overtime. Arturi Lehkonen wins it with half a second left in OT, and that was after a big, big, big Sean Walker day. He had 2 goals in regulation, and yeah,
Oh, he looked so good.
this Colorado team, and like Nikolai Kovalenko got like, listen, could he be Nikita Gusev? Yes, it,
Totally.
but he I would have money on him being a whole lot better than that. You could be bringing in, like Kirill Kaprizov's a 100-point player. He's one of the best wingers in the league. So I don't want to go so far as to say Kaprizov, but look at the effect Andrei Kuzmenko had on the Canucks last year in a good Fed. He had 39 goals. Like Nikolai Kovalenko, he's a better forward than Andrei Kuzmenko from what I've seen. He's definitely more complete, right? Kuzmenko put up a lot of empty points, not necessarily in Vancouver, but definitely in the KHL because he munched power play points just from excelling in front of the net and around the net. And that's not to, discredit players who score a lot on the power play, but Kovalenko can do he can produce in every way. It's not if he's not doing X, he's not effective. He's an excellent player, and he could really step into a top 6 role right away. And you add that to the Colorado Avalanche, who already look as good as they do after the deadline. Like that Casey Middlestat assist on the second Sean Walker goal was beautiful against Edmonton. Just the patience waiting for the lane to open up and then sliding it right through the passing lane that eventually did to Walker, who scored. Like again, like I think I said this after the deadline, might have been even in the last episode. Colorado might have my favorite post deadline roster on paper, and yeah, we'll see what they can do. They've obviously got a tough Central to get out of. Winnipeg's playing really well. Hellebuyck's playing really well. Dallas is playing really well, but sky's the limit for them again here, and especially if they get Landeskog back in the playoffs, which hasn't been ruled out yet.
I just want to point out that post-deadline roster of Colorado's without Landeskog includes only 5 of the 13 forwards that were on their roster the summer before last on their cup run. That's wild. That's a
That is
lot of turnover.
Well, and remember 2010, the Chicago Blackhawks' Stanley Cup winning roster in 2010 looked absolutely nothing like the one they won the cup with in 2013. They had a lot of bottom 6 guys on cheap deals. Remember Andrew Ladd moved on for big money. Dustin Byfuglien moved on, right? Like that's going to happen, and then the test is how do you adapt to that? How do you still make the team competitive despite the downfalls, for lack of a better term, of winning the Stanley Cup, which is you got to pay people more.
Totally. And aside from proper asset management, the way you adapt to that, if you're Colorado, is Nathan McKinnon having a somewhat historic season, and him and Nikita Kucherov just completing their battle, it seems. I mean, McDavid's still right behind them, but McKinnon at 116 points, Kucherov at 114, about the same games played. It's neck and neck, and it has been for so long. Like one of them will go 8 points ahead. I think at one point Kucherov was ahead by 10, and the next thing you know, McKinnon's ahead by 8, and now they're only separated by 2 again. It's we've talked about this so much. We haven't stopped beating this drum. But there's a reason we haven't stopped beating this drum. And that's because in the last decade, I could name maybe 2 or 3 seasons where it was actually a neck and neck battle for the Art Ross. Maybe 3, if that. And those seasons were way lower scoring seasons as well. So this is the kind of thing you dream of, the kind of thing you want to watch, and the kind of thing that makes you click on a game when maybe it's not even one of your teams. Maybe it's not a game you're all that interested in watching, but you see that Nikita Kucherov and the Bolts are about to play Ottawa, and you're like, oh my God, he might put up 5 points tonight and pass McKinnon, and I want to watch.
Not to be lost in all this, McKinnon obviously well above 100 points. He's at 116. Um, that is his second consecutive and second career 100-point season. He hasn't ever scored 50 goals. And
No.
it's a definite possibility that both Nathan McKinnon and Nikita Kucherov score 50 goals this season. McKinnon's ahead of him. Kucherov would have to up his pace a little bit. But man, like we've talked about this on this podcast, just the uptick in points. Like there is I think we have 9 100-point scorers this year.
So is that going down to Draisaitl? Is that where you're
Yeah,
stopping, or are you
yeah,
stopping
yeah.
at Matthews?
No, I'm stopping at Draisaitl. I think Draisaitl and everybody above is going to hit 100 points this season. So McKinnon, Kucherov, McDavid, Pasternak, Panarin, Rantanen, William Nylander, JT Miller, Leon Draisaitl. And again, like it's continuously rising. We're going to have at least 3, potentially 4 50-goal scorers. I really, really hope Nathan McKinnon does score 50 goals. Pasternak could reach that as well, be the 5th. Kucherov, as I mentioned, is in 6th with 40. Matthews has already hit it. Sam Reinhart's 2 goals back. Hyman's 4 goals back. Like it's a lot of scoring this season, and again, I'll we've referenced early 2010s TSN. I'll reference an early 2010 scoring race, 2009-10. Do you remember Henrik Sedin passing Ovechkin and Crosby in the last game of the season with like just I think a 5 or 6 point performance against Calgary? Daniel Sedin had a hat trick, and yeah, like that's the most recent like coming down to the final day one that I can really remember, aside from I think Jamie Benn beat John Tavares by a point in 2016.
Yeah, that was a 3-point game for Ben, if I remember.
Yeah, to get him to 87, which feels a lot different than the 116 points McKinnon has on March 18th.
Yeah, just for perspective, like to find someone who has 87 points, you have to go down to 7th place. There's a two-way tie between Nylander and JT Miller, and that's with like 14 games left to play. So, I mean, we're looking at a little different scoring pace than back then, but that's what we wanted. We were like people were complaining about that, and the NHL granted that. So,
Too many players this year have been too good for Dylan Larkin to get Hart Trophy consideration, but the way the Detroit Red Wings have been playing without him makes me kind of think that maybe Dylan Larkin should get at least a little bit of love because man, he was
yeah,
having a
some
great
nice 10th
year.
place votes.
Yeah, exactly. Great year. 54 points in 55 games. He gets hurt. And the Detroit Red Wings without him, man, have just been it has not been good. And like the defense is definitely struggling. Like Mo Sider is doing his best, but Shane Gostisbehere's never been a dream defensively. Jake Wallman has been awesome or been very not awesome, as has Ollie Mata, as has Ben Sherratt, as has Jeff Petrie, as has Justin Hall, right? It's a lot of it's a lot of players on this Red Wings team where if they're all playing their best, like you see this team as a bona fide playoff contender. But the way they're playing right now, save for Patrick Kane, who's almost at a point per game, which is incredible.
It's
Um,
amazing. My fantasy team loves it.
yeah, except for him, this team really needs to turn it around because we were talking on a recent episode about how, we're starting to think, okay, maybe the 16 teams in the NHL that are in the playoffs right now are going to stay in the playoffs. Detroit have gone 2-8-0 in their last 10. Washington and the Islanders are a single point back each. Washington's got 2 games in hand. The Islanders have 1 game in hand on the Red Wings. Pittsburgh's on 69 points, 5 games back of the Red Wings. They have a game in hand on Detroit. Even Buffalo, same amount of games played, 69 points. New Jersey, same amount of games played, 68 points. And Detroit's they've really got to turn this around, and they're going to have to do it without their captain and without the heartbeat of that team and Dylan Larkin. And man, I do think the Red Wings. I think they're coming in terms of being a solid NHL team again, but I definitely think this season goes to show just kind of just how young they really are, and that's not to put down any of those young players. Lucas Raymond's having an awesome year. Alex DeBrincat's having a really solid year as well, but man, that they need to figure it out if they want to be a playoff team this year. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like a sure thing, but Aiden, I don't think it's going to happen. I think we are going to see probably the New York Islanders in there instead. That's my guess. It could be the Washington Capitals, which would be pretty cool. I mean, but yeah, I don't know. I just don't think it's going to happen anymore. But the silver lining is if Washington makes it, then some of my childhood still exists. That's the silver lining. Like Patrick Kane not playing for almost half of this year, that kind of made it so like I don't really it doesn't hurt as much to not see him in the playoffs, but seeing Ovi get so stoked in the tunnel on the way in, doing all of his different handshakes with all of his teammates, that that's an opening of playoffs tradition for me. Like I need to see that. And it just kind of feels empty without it. Like you want to see that. It's kind of like how, I mean, maybe not as much for you, but one thing I really miss in the playoffs is not seeing the Habs intro where they light the torch at the middle of the ice and the holographic flame goes across the whole ice. And to skate out the torch, some little kid goes out and he's been passed the torch from some Habs legend. That was like money, absolute magic. Like for on like CBC broadcasts and Sportsnet broadcasts, on every broadcast, late 2000s, early 2010s. And I think it kind of trickled into the mid 2010s, but we haven't seen it in so long, and I need to see it. I need to see that. And I have zero hope in Montreal even next year. So I'm gonna have to wait a long time for that. So I guess that bookends the fact that getting Ovi to do a fun handshake and look really intensely into the camera as his team's losing, that's something I want to watch. I mean, I'd love to see him win, but that team's not going to do any damage in the playoffs. I don't see it at least, but I just want to see that. What do you think?
Yeah, I concur with you that I think it's going to be the Islanders. Washington, I don't see having the legs. They're not deep enough to stay in that race. I can empathize with what you mean about the nostalgia and the childhood memories of those players playing in the playoffs. Pittsburgh and Washington both missed their first playoffs in forever last season, and I would probably put my money on New York. Again, I'm cheering for Washington. Speaking of Hart Trophy, I do wonder if Sidney Crosby.
Wait. Before we move on there, before you talk about the Hart Trophy, if Detroit makes the playoffs, considering the way they've gone storylines, it's going to be on the last game of the season. They're going to make it by 1 point because of a Patrick Kane overtime goal, and he's going to scream showtime into the camera.
Didn't he do that already this season?
Yeah, but this one would be a bigger moment.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, on Kane's, you talk about clutch hockey players of this decade, like Patrick Kane is right up there with plenty of others, but potentially near, if not at the top of that list. Um, and then yeah, the other New Jersey and Pittsburgh, both teams with higher expectations in this season. Sidney Crosby's dragging that team kicking and screaming into contention, but I
Too
don't
little,
see,
too late.
yeah, I don't see either of them getting it done. So I think it's Detroit. Are you going to figure it out? If yes, you can be a playoff team. If not, then I do think it's the Islanders who are going to catch up.
Definitely. I mean, I just want to watch it draw close to the end. I think that's something I want to see is I want to see a team make it on the last day of the season. I don't want it locked in for 4 or 5 games before that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Like,
We
let's get
want
some
drama.
drama.
We
Yeah,
want
totally.
chaos, absolute chaos. But yeah, I mean, speaking of something a little bit less chaotic though, pretty cool thing happened in the NHL. Something you don't see all that often, and something I'm glad we don't see that often. And I'm glad this one, and I'm not targeting any other statues. This one is deserved. Mike Modano had a statue unveiled in Dallas. That guy, I mean, up until Patrick Kane, probably the greatest American player of all time. And you talk to anyone who watched hockey in the 90s, 2000s, they can still visibly see Modano's jersey waving down the ice as he skated by. Like he is a legend, an all-timer, and this statue is well deserved. But the thing I want to ask you, because I know you probably never really saw him play much.
Minimally.
Yeah, yeah, and it would have been at the end as well. So like the thing I want to ask you is where you stand on statues. What do you think the checklist is to get a statue in your city?
I don't know if I can identify a checklist in terms of you accomplish X, Y, or Z because the it's much like it's much like retired jersey numbers, right? You know the pendulum is going to swing from every team depending on how successful they've been, how historic they are. The Dallas Stars have been around since 1993. Mike Modano came in and was a superstar for them. 50 goal scorer, 93 points. It was his career high. He did it twice. Once was in Dallas, and I totally agree with what you said about, the greatest American players of all time being Patrick Kane and then Mike Modano. Brian Leach is probably right behind the two of them. Um, he was such an icon for the Dallas Stars, right? They haven't had a player like him really since. Like you can definitely make an argument that this group of players has the chance, whether it's Jason Robertson, Rupe Hintz, or Miro Heiskanen to reach Modano's level. Jason Robertson's already got a higher career high in points than Modano ever did. But man, like he scored through the dead puck era. He was a warrior for that team. He had some pretty unbelievable playoff runs. Um, Obviously he won the Stanley Cup there. I agree also with what you said about, I'm glad it doesn't happen often. It's reserved for these special players. I probably couldn't give you a clear answer on, okay, what do they have to have accomplished? But whatever the answer to that question is, Mike Modano definitely did, and it's a very deserving honor.
Well, I agree with everything you just said, but I do have a little bit of a mini checklist in mind. I think you have to have won a cup with that team, but there can't have been a bunch of cups in your past. I think like you have to have been on that team for a long time, been the heartbeat of that team, and you have to have accomplished more than anyone else in the past in that franchise with that Stanley Cup. Like if if the Habs go and win 3 cups with Nick Suzuki as their captain, he doesn't get a statue. Like no way. There's too much past. There's too much history. If Toronto goes and wins a Stanley Cup or two, and Austin Matthews gets a Conn Smythe, he can have a statue. Sure. It's been that long. And Toronto would do that kind of thing. Sure. But like you think back in history, like how many players actually have a statue? I think LA did one, maybe. I think the Kings did one. Did they do one for Doughty and Kopitar? Is that a thing?
Not to my recollection.
I feel like there was something I saw about a statue. I gotta research it now, but like you see what I mean about like you have to have accomplished more than any other player in the past for you to get a statue and them not have one.
No, I don't disagree with you. I think you're pretty bang on, and yeah, great for Modano. Great move from the Dallas Stars. Love it.
Oh, okay. I've got the LA Kings monument that was unveiled in 2022. From left to right, the monument depicts the following athletes: Jonathan Quick, Drew Doughty, Marcel Dion, Dave Taylor, Rob Blake, Anze Kopitar, and then Dustin Brown hoisting the Stanley Cup. That's a lot of stuff. where do you stand on that one? I'm not gonna say any of them don't deserve it because like legends on legends on legends, and like we're just some dudes on a podcast. But like, where do you stand on that giant monument with 7 players on it?
Okay, I don't know if this is gonna sound silly or not. I almost am more okay with it because it's one thing with a bunch of guys. If they had
Yeah.
done like whole statues and whole unveilings for each of those players individually, I would totally think it's overkill and totally think it shouldn't have been that many. But if it's one monument that is like, okay, here are the greatest kings of all time, like I'm totally cool with that. I get it.
Yeah, and I was wrong on the unveiling date. It was actually 2016. But yeah, I totally agree with you. Like if they just had like a Marcel Dion statue before, and then they were like, okay, let's add a Doughty. Now let's go add a Quick. But then like a bunch of them all together, that works for me. And I guess that gives me one more question to ask you. If you could have a statue of any Vancouver Canucks player out front, what would it be?
That is a good question. I think the answer is the I think you have to go both Sedins if you're going to do anybody. It's, they were the most impactful for the Vancouver Canucks organization, I think, in their careers.
The
Pavel
length
Bur
of time too.
Yeah, like Pavel Bure was so good, but he wasn't there for very long. Trevor Linden was a heart and soul guy, captain, heartbeat of the team. I agree with Trevor Linden's number being retired, but I wouldn't put him on the same level as the Sedins. But you know what? Honestly, we'll see. If this core wins a Stanley Cup and Quinn Hughes hoists it, there you go. It's Quinn Hughes. But as of right now, it's the Sedins. And I don't even really think I don't think there's an argument. I think it has
Yeah,
to
no
be.
cup, no statue.
Yeah, well, and they came the closest too, right? They won the
Yeah.
most hardware for the team. So yeah, I don't disagree with the fact that you'd hope that you could work a Stanley Cup reference into a statue unveiling. But if you're asking me Canucks 50-year history without a Stanley Cup, it's the Sedins for sure.
Caden, I have a little bit of fun for you as we come close to the end of the season here. Like I said earlier, we probably have like maybe 16 games at most left for each team. Some of them have as little as 14, I believe, or 13. And so we're getting close to the playoffs. It's coming. Like they happen in what, like mid-April, late April. So like it's on its way. And I just want to ask you as we get here, I think we did this last year as well. What are your 3 biggest wishes for this upcoming playoffs? Things you want to see the most, things that just get your hockey heartbeat going.
Okay. I don't know if this is. I want to see at the very least, because what, there's 8 first rounds and 4 second rounds. So 15 playoff rounds. Give me 10 game sevens.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be so good.
Right. And you can imagine some of these possible matchups. Like you could picture a Colorado Dallas second round rematch in game seven again, right? Same thing that happened in 2020. A Vegas, an Edmonton Vegas or an Edmonton LA game seven would be awesome just because of the recent playoff history those teams have. Uh, Another Boston Toronto game seven potentially, right? Like there's a lot of fun you could have there. The closer and the more hotly contested each series is, the more entertaining they're going to be. Number two, I would very much like to see either the Vancouver Canucks, which is obviously number one on my list, but if the Canucks don't, I really want to see the Edmonton Oilers in at least the Western Conference Final. I want to see a Canadian team in the Final Four.
What about the Leafs?
No, but I did
Oh.
find myself I found myself a little bit like disconnected from the conference finals last year.
Wait. What about the Jets?
Winnipeg too, yeah, for sure. Winnipeg, Vancouver, or Edmonton getting to the West Final would be awesome. Um, I found myself, like I said, disconnected with the conference finals last year. It's just I didn't really feel like I had a team that usually I have a team in the final four that I'm like, yeah, I want them to win the Stanley Cup, whether it be because I like a lot of their players. I like a specific player a lot. Um, I really didn't have that last year. I definitely didn't want Vegas to win, and they won, which sucked. Um, but really having something to cheer for because and listen, I'm a Canucks fan. I'm not a Canucks fan, and I'm not the kind of fan in general who is going to like hate a team or heavily dislike a team just because they're a rival, kind of the way Edmonton is to Vancouver, like a proximity rivalry. I grew up with that Edmonton team having Jordan Eberle on it, who was one of my favorite players when I was a kid. Then it was Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, and it's hard not to love those players on that team. So yeah, like as much as I'd love it to be the Canucks, if it's not the Canucks, Oilers and Jets, go for it. Connor McDavid deserves more playoff success than he's had, and Leon Draisaitl is a playoff monster. So, um, if it can't be Vancouver, I'd love it to be Edmonton or Winnipeg. Perfect world, the Canucks go as far as they, as far as they can. Don't know what that's going to be as of right now. We'll see how they perform with Thatcher Demko going down with an injury. We'll have Casey DeSmith in there for hopefully just shy of a month. That's worst case scenario. It was 4 weeks as I saw. Number three, I want to not see one single goal challenged for offside in the NHL playoffs.
Oh, that's awesome. Aiden, I was going to use that one. That was
Are
on my
you
list.
serious?
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, and I
Yeah.
remember, it wasn't last year, it was 2 years ago, the big Cale Makar Colorado offside controversy. That was like definitely onside, by the way. Um I really still can't get over the fact that it even still seems to sometimes pop up from now and then. No, it was onside. That's the rule. It was allowed. It was a good goal. Leave it. But and that's kind of why I say no goals even challenged. Like I don't want the pause, I don't want the delay, I don't want the controversy. Goal goes in, get happy, and don't worry about the fact that 3 minutes ago the entry was off. And you know what? The NHL putting in that rule that you get a delay of game penalty if you're unsuccessful, it's deterred it. And it's deterred it well enough that it doesn't feel like the massive nuisance it was in that 2017 playoffs. Um,
Oh,
yeah,
gross.
that one Nashville one where it was like Philip Forsberg bringing the puck in 3 minutes prior to Subban scoring and took 10 minutes to review and eventually wasn't a goal. Like, just, I don't want that. What are your three? And if, yeah, you can, you can concur with that one if you want.
I've got a new third as well.
Okay.
So my first one is I want to see another ridiculously long, like 4 or 5 overtimes game. I want to hear stories about players having to get mustard packets in to get their electrolytes up and having to eat pizza between periods because they are like losing their marbles and just running on fumes. I want to see an unsung hero score that goal as well. And then that's like a career defining moment for that player. Like I want to see like an Andre Suster level player score that goal.
Or like a Joel Kiviranta.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it'll be nice for him to score heartbreaker goals for Colorado rather than Dallas. That'll be nice, especially considering they are slated to play each other in the first round right now, and that first round could end up being Stanley Cup final level entertainment considering how good those teams are. Number two, keeping the unsung hero theme, I want a Cinderella story. I want a team that has no business getting to the third round, being in the third round. Last year we had Florida. I mean, on paper they had business, but like they limped their way into the playoffs and they were battling so many injuries, and that was just such an awesome story to follow along with. Like they were just warriors.
Okay, you know who I wonder about?
The LA Kings.
No, Nashville. They've got
Yeah.
one of the best goalies in the league. They are red hot, and they added some playoff guys. Like, you can't tell me that Ryan O'Reilly is not gonna be awesome for them. They are hot, man. And I have a lot of faith in UC Saros. I have a lot of faith in Roman Yossi, and I've got a lot of faith in Ryan O'Reilly. And Philip Forsberg's having a very quiet, amazing season too.
If the over under for O'Reilly points for that series is 4.5, which I think it will be, hammer that over. Hammer it. It will, I think that's gonna hit. And then like maybe you see like a Tommy Novak overtime winner to upset the Jets. I think that'd be pretty sweet. I would really like that. And number three, I want to see a player on that cup winning team retire immediately after winning the Stanley Cup. I think that's one of the coolest moments to go out on top like that and just skate off the ice, see your family, and know, yeah, this is it. This is it. I did it. I've accomplished the goal that I've had since I was in diapers, and I'm ready to move on from this chapter of my life in the best way possible.
James, if Gabriel Landeskog plays and wins the cup with Colorado this year, will you be happy to see that retirement happen if it happens that way?
I'd be okay with that for how much the guy's gone through to get to this point. I would understand that.
Okay. Okay, what is that? Is that three or do you have one more, right?
That's all three.
No, it's you had unsung overtime and somebody calling it quits. Yeah. No, if all I mean all six of those things are definitely not going to happen. If they did, we'd be talking about some of the greatest playoff hockey we've ever seen. But yeah, man, it's exciting and it's weird for me to be excited about watching the Canucks in the playoffs because the one time it's happened since 2015 was the very weird COVID bubble, and it was awesome, especially because COVID was so happening at that point that there wasn't a lot else to do. So there was plenty of time to get very invested in those playoffs. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm going to hopefully be back in BC by the last weekend of April and stay there for a chunk of the summer. And man, I'm excited to be around when the Canucks are in the playoffs. And I just hope it's not super short lived.
Oh, dude, Vancouver gets lively when they're on a playoff run. Like, I will never forget being 13 years old and the entirety of the lower mainland just being on board for this cup run, like billboards everywhere, flags everywhere, everyone wearing jerseys to the grocery store. Like, this was like life at its hockey peak. It's just the most incredible thing. Kind of just to hit the tail end of this playoff picture section we ended up impromptu doing. I just want to look at what every series would look like if the playoffs started today, because probably half of them will change. That's usually where I stand at this point. But in the Eastern Conference, Bruins Red Wings, that's one that we think will probably end up changing. Then Panthers Leafs, Rangers Lightning, Hurricanes Flyers. Then in the West, we're looking at Jets Predators, Avalanche Stars, Canucks Golden Knights, and Oilers Kings for what, the third year in a row?
Yeah, it would be.
Yeah, I mean, of all those series, what is the most exciting to you, and what are you least excited to watch?
I'd be pretty fired up about like I like the Jets, and it's not to say that I wouldn't watch these games, but I would be especially excited about every Western Conference series that isn't Winnipeg. Again, not that there's something especially wrong with Winnipeg Nashville. That's a rematch of a 2018 second round. Um, but yeah, Vancouver Vegas, super alluring rematch of a 2020 second round. Edmonton LA, like you just said, they've played in two consecutive playoffs before this one.
There's some hatred there.
There is, and Edmonton's won twice, right? Like it's one thing if you split it. It's a whole other thing to have lost to a team 2 years in a row and get a third crack at them. Like think Vancouver, Chicago, late 2000s, early 2010s. Um, and then in the Central, Colorado, Dallas, again, another second round rematch from 4 years ago, and two just really, really good hockey teams that play at a very high pace, right? Like I was watching that Colorado Edmonton game the other night. In truth, I had both that and the Canucks game on at the same time, so I was watching both as well as I could. And Colorado and Edmonton play at such like a different speed. Like it's so
Yeah.
fast, and I think Colorado Dallas would have a similar feel to it. Dallas isn't as fast a team as Edmonton is, but they definitely are quick and they play quick. And then in the Eastern Conference, run me through them again.
East, Boston, Detroit, Florida, Toronto, Rangers, Lightning, and Hurricanes, Flyers.
I like Rangers Lightning a lot. I
That's
really
fun.
do.
That's really fun.
I like Kucherov and Panarin playing each other again.
Yeah.
That 2019 first round between the Lightning and the Blue Jackets, which had Panarin on that team, was hilarious. Artemi
Red
Panarin,
Man was nasty.
yeah, our Panarin trying to like dab up Kucherov in the handshake, and Kucherov just not having any of it was hilarious. And then Kucherov turns around and wins 2 straight Stanley Cups. So I think he got the last laugh. Um, but Panarin, man, I would love to see the Rangers win the cup just so Panarin wins the cup. I love him. Just I I really do. And I do think they'd beat Tampa, but I think that would be a fun series. I don't want Boston or Toronto to win their first rounds in that scenario, but the prospect of a Bruins Maple Leaf second round is very cool in that Atlantic.
Yeah, it's a
And
fun storyline.
I think Florida Toronto is too. Like
Yeah.
again, Toronto was not supposed to lose to Florida in the second round last year, and they did not play good hockey. Florida beat them every single game, and even if they were close, like Game 5 was in overtime, I think Game 3 was a late winner from Reinhart. Florida still outplayed them. They outplayed them the entire series. So Toronto getting a little bit of comeuppance, or at least the chance to get some comeuppance, will be a storyline to watch as well.
It's another word I've never heard you say before, comeuppance. That's not one that's regularly in your vocabulary. I think I'm on pace to point one of those out a third time in a row next pod. So I'm looking forward to that. Now I'm listening for words that you don't usually say.
Yeah, just take notes.
Yeah, I I'm excited for some of the same series as you, but um I think I think Florida is going to be in the finals again. So every team I'm looking at in the East
Wow.
is irrelevant to me right now. I think the Panthers are that good. I think that Vladimir Tarasenko playing with Reinhardt and Barkov is just disgusting. Like that is nightmare fuel to defend against and to try and play in the neutral zone against. Like that sucks for anyone going against those guys. And I feel really bad for the third liners who accidentally get matched up against them on a bad line change. That's gonna really, really suck. Like you might not have a contract next year if you're a free agent and they make you look stupid. It's very possible. So whoever Florida plays in the second round, that's the series I'm looking forward to the most in the East because I think they're going to absolutely violate whoever they play in the first round. I don't care who it is. I don't care at all who it is. And right now it's Toronto, but it could very, very quickly become Detroit. I would feel very bad for the Red Wings if that's the case. But I mean, in the West, I've already talked enough about it. Colorado, Dallas. That is possibly going to be the best series all playoffs. If both these teams show up, which I don't see why they wouldn't. I mean, Dallas on paper gets the goalie edge. Ottinger, like I think obviously the better goaltender than Alexander Georgiev. But I mean,
Georgiev's been like not insignificantly better this season though, right? Like
yeah,
yes, Ottinger, you take the entire body of work over the last few years, Ottinger, you would say is, if you're making a power ranking list, starting next season, you're probably putting him above him just because, like you've seen him be that. He hasn't been that this year. He's not been very good. So,
and we saw some shaky games in the playoffs from him last year as well.
yeah, you did.
So, I mean, yes, Dallas's blue line looks a little bit more trustworthy. Another year of development from Thomas Harley, another year more experience from Heiskanen. The addition of Chris Tanev, like Ryan Suter on the third pair. Esa Lindell's a good defenseman. Like, I think maybe a little more confident in front of him. And then you have a more dependable four forward lines now. But I mean, you get either of these teams' power plays going, it could end up a complete shootout and a nightmare for both goaltenders, or it could be 2-1 games. Like, I have no idea what's going to happen, but I have this very, very bad feeling that Matt Duchene is going to score in game 7 overtime in Colorado.
Oh man.
Yeah,
Oh
I've
boy,
I've
wouldn't
just
that
got this
be?
feeling like that's the kind of thing that happens. Like, and I am never going to buy into the fact that the NHL is scripted. It's too all over the place to be scripted. But I mean, like, that's a storyline that you could definitely see. And he's been lights out this season. Slowed down a little bit as of late, but Matt Duchene has been a revelation for the Stars and really helped out their depth. So that's something we could see for sure. I think if Colorado is to be able to win that series, I need 5 points and plus hockey from Casey Middlestat.
That's been what they've been missing all season is him, right?
Yeah.
And so it stands to reason that his emergence would be very welcome.
I mean, as of right now, their second line is Lehkonen, Middlestat, Drouin. I think they do the Drouin Rantanen swap, and then they play Nichushkin, McKinnon, Drouin, which I have no problem with whatsoever. And then they spread it out a bit to be able to match Dallas's depth, which I mean they've done it before. That all depends like what Kovalenko is and if Landeskog comes back. So I mean, there are so many storylines going into the series, but I think like if any team is going to beat Colorado in the West this year and Nathan McKinnon's storybook season, it's the Dallas Stars in the first round.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Colorado matches up better against everybody else in the Western
I agree.
Conference. Yeah,
I
like
agree. I mean, like there's some Vegas demons to be slayed, and there's definitely some hatred between those teams, but I mean, like I'm more worried about Dallas. I just am. I mean, but also we don't know what Thomas Hurdle looks like for the Vegas Golden Knights. That could be frightening. That could be really frightening. So, I mean, that's a worry as well. But moving on, we've talked at nauseum about the Avalanche in the playoffs at this point. I believe, Aiden, you had something you want to talk about with the Philadelphia Flyers and top prospect Matvei Michkov.
yeah, nothing new aside from the fact that he's continuing to play very, very well. And I did want to ask you, James, like for a long time, for a few years now, without a doubt, the Ottawa Senators, the Detroit Red Wings, and the Buffalo Sabres have probably been the three teams where if you were to ask a hockey fan, like, okay, who's the next powerhouse coming? Like, who do you like their young players? Who do you think is building for the future the best? Those are probably your answers. I've been big on the Sabres for a few years now, and they've continuously let me down. Um,
Yeah.
man, Matvei Michkov this season in Sochi, 41 points in 47 games. That's a lot in the KHL for a 19-year-old. Kids do not play in that league, and he is playing and scoring at a very high clip. But that brings me to the more broad topic that again, Philadelphia is in the playoffs this year. Everybody's treating this like a fluke. And in a way, it's an overachievement, sure. But you look at this Flyers lineup. Travis Konechny started the season at the age of 26. Joel Farabee's still young. Owen Tippett's still young. Travis Sanheim, who feels like he's been around forever, is still 27 years old. You've got Morgan Frost at 24, Tyson Forster having a really solid rookie year at 21, Cam York having a solid season at 22, Bobby Brink, Igor Zamula. You've got a lot of guys on this team right now. Don't forget they got
Samuel Urson. Samuel Urson.
Urson and Nad. Don't forget they've got Jamie Drysdale, uh, who's out right now with an injury. They got him from the Anaheim Ducks for Cutter Gauthier. And you look at some of the guys who aren't there yet. Matvei Michkov, obviously, but he's joined in that 2023 draft class with Oliver Bonk and Carson Bjarnason in the first two rounds. And you look down the line a little bit, their 2021 second rounder, Samu Tuomala, is having an amazing first season with the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. Again, it's not easy to make that jump to pro, especially because he wasn't playing in the tier one of Finland. He was playing in their tier two league and has 40 points in 58 games. That's second on Philadelphia's AHL affiliate. I I've got a lot of faith in these Philadelphia Flyers, James. I think we have to start respecting them in that category of like looking ahead. And I haven't even brought up Massimo Rizzo yet. He is scoring at a ridiculous place at the University of Denver this season. He's got 44 points in 28 games as a 22-year-old. He was a Carolina seventh rounder. Carolina traded his rights to Philadelphia in last August, and he looks like he could very well be a stud for them and found money. Like, uh, again, I don't know what you think. I don't know if you think they're approaching or exceeding the levels of some of the other young teams that are making their mark in the good way or the bad way, right? Like Detroit look like they're coming, right? Like that they were in the playoffs this year. Buffalo and Ottawa on the other side both massively disappointed this season and were well below expectations. What do you think about Philadelphia? Is it time to, especially with Matvey Michkov in that organization, is it time to start respecting them as like a, all right, you list out the teams that could win the 2028 Stanley Cup right now? Philly's close to the top of that list.
Yes, and for a couple more reasons that you hadn't mentioned. One of them is a complete wild card prospect in my eyes. That is 22-year-old Belarusian goaltender Alexei Kolosov. He's currently playing with Dynamo Minsk in the KHL. I mean, he has been a starter for 2 full seasons now. He played half the season the year before that. So like 3 seasons of pro hockey, like at a very high level under his belt. 907 and 912 save percentages during the regular season on a pretty average team. So kind of expected. But then when he gets to playoffs, 917 and 925 save percentages. That is looking pretty nice. And I mean, like, we've seen a lot of goalie prospects come out of that league and end up complete studs. Wouldn't blow me away if he ended up pretty solid as well. But one more reason, and that is because of their general manager, Mr. Danny Briere. Aiden, do you know how many draft picks he's put together
I'll
in
let
the
you tell
first
me.
couple rounds over the next few years?
I'll let you tell me. Go.
Aiden, they're looking at having 2 first round picks in each of the next 2 seasons. Their own in Florida's this year, their own in Colorado's next year. 2 second round picks each of the next 2 seasons. That alone is a nice little shot. That's a nice little chance at getting a like what? Probably 2 impact players come out of those 4 first round picks. I mean, like 50% shot, right? I mean, it's probably a little bit under that, but that's pretty quality to me. And then those second rounders can turn into something as well. Or since they're already seeming to, turn the page a little bit quicker, maybe they draft someone and trade them away. Maybe they sign a big free agent. How funny would it be to you if Philly going into next season signs one of the biggest free agents available? What if they just hand Sam Reinhart 9-5? I mean, there you go. There's a first
Honest,
line forward.
I'm I'm probably going to be a little bit like premature in this statement. I think Philadelphia should be building around Matvey Michkov. I think he will be the centerpiece to that franchise, and I think they should do their best to be competitive during his prime. And so a big Sam Reinhart contract doesn't jive for me with that, and I don't think it would be wise. And I think Danny Briere, in all honesty, has told us through his moves and savviness so far, he's smarter than that. I don't think it's going to happen.
Okay. Okay. Well, listen to this. Let's hear 2025 NHL free agents. Free agents next summer after they've had 2 years with 4 first round picks. We're looking at Mitch Marner, Mikko Rantanen, Leon Draisaitl. Those three, like they probably won't get to free agency. But what if one of them does? What if one of them does and you're Philly and you're looking at it like, well, how much money could we give him to play with Matvey Michkov as he comes into the league? What if Matvey Michkov is coming into the NHL playing on a line with Leon Draisaitl, Mitch Marner, or Mikko Rantanen? It's huge hypotheticals, right? Like massive. But you go down the list: Pavel Buchnevich, Nikolai Ehlers. Ivan Provorov is a free agent that year, which I don't think he'd be going back. Aaron Ekblad. Like, you have a lot of potential to add very good players
Yeah,
in
I
that
think
free class.
I definitely think like an Ekblad is more likely and almost a better bet, especially
Oh,
moving on from
totally,
from
totally. Like, you
Walker.
should not bet on these players to hit there. This is a complete hypothetical.
Yeah, I know what you mean, and don't forget Philadelphia was in pretty hard on Johnny Gaudreau too. They were.
Um, Continuing down the list: Carter Verhaeghe, Shea Theodore, Jacob Chikrin, Sam Bennett. Would Sam Bennett not make an unreal flyer?
I think that, and they need centers, right? They do.
Yeah.
That's just a fact. And so I think Bennett would be a great fit. Yeah.
And then what if Igor Shesterkin were to price himself out of New York? Do you imagine that? Philly loves handing goalies money.
Oh, they do. And they often don't work, but we'll see.
I mean, it's just a fun thought. It's fun to think of a team right as their top prospect comes in, just loading right up. Just saying, all right, let's do this. Why not? Let's have some fun with this. Let's, I mean, they don't have a problem filling the stands. So why not, right?
Okay, what's next?
Well, Aiden, I don't want to say it, but I'm going to. The sun is shining. Today is a great day. And it ain't the Great Canadian Hockey Podcast without a couple great games to play. And do I ever have some fun trivia for you? I want you to name me more than one player that was drafted in the NHL entry draft twice, as in they had to re-enter the draft and go ahead again.
Okay, I have an answer that I don't know if it's cheating or not because one of them is definitely Massi Marjamaki, who we had on as a guest around Christmas time. He was picked twice, once by Boston, I believe, first, and then by the New York Islanders.
Correct?
Um, so that's my first one. The other one is going to be a former Colorado Avalanche first round pick.
I thought you were going to go this way.
Yeah, 2014, they take Connor Bleakley in the first round out of the Red Deer Rebels, I remember. And he didn't really get much better after they took him in the first round. So after two pretty underwhelming seasons with Red Deer in the WHL, especially considering, a first round pick, you expect some pretty big things in their 19 and 20-year-old seasons.
He had
Um,
already been traded to Arizona as well.
right.
Yeah, his rights got traded to Arizona for Alex Tanguay.
I totally forgot about that. Was it for Alex Tanguay?
I believe it was in that trade. Or was it the Bodker deal?
Wasn't it with Tanguay for Bodker?
Hmm.
That jives with the timeline more because Alex Tanguay, if I am remembering correctly, would not have been like he came to Colorado before Bleakley got drafted by the Avs, so it would have been a with Bleakley for Bodker.
Yeah, you're right. His rights were traded in a trade alongside Alex Tanguay and fellow prospect Kyle Wood to the Arizona Coyotes in exchange for Michael Bodker.
Yeah, because Tanguay was there. Like I remember him playing. The reason I knew that is because I remember that 2014 Minnesota Colorado first round really well,
Yeah,
and Tanguay played in that series. I know.
that's right.
So, but yeah, Connor Bleakley's the other one. I don't remember who drafted him, but he was the fifth rounder like
St.
afterwards.
Louis.
Okay, there you go. And he
Yeah.
is, yeah, he definitely didn't work out the way Colorado hoped when they picked him in the first round.
See, I thought you might go with Bleakley. I knew you were gonna get Massey. I knew you were gonna get that
Oh, of
one because if
course, yeah,
you
had
didn't
it.
get that one, that was a complete flub. But the other two that are pretty relevant are Frederick Anderson and Craig Anderson.
I forgot about Freddie, but yeah, totally.
Yeah, drafted by the Hurricanes in 2010, goes back into the draft, gets drafted by the Ducks in 2012. Then Craig Anderson way back 1999 picked by the Flames, then picked again by the Blackhawks in 2001. Other names I thought you might get were Jarrett Stoll and Mike Rupp. Those are the only two that I remember ever hearing it about. There's a lot of no names, like a lot of guys whose names you would just never recognize. Matthew Lombardi was one.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah, but yeah, it was kind of an interesting little piece of history to throw it back into. And then I have a career trajectory for you.
Okay.
And I found this my very fun way of finding career trajectories where right when we're talking before we hit the record button, I go to a random roster in the NHL. It's often Columbus or Montreal, and then I click on a player and then I click on that another player from a random team that that player played with years before, and then I go down that rabbit hole about 3 or 4 times, and then I see a name that jumps out to me, and I land on it. So this player was drafted in 2004, but his NHL career spanned from 2008 to 2018. He went from the Phoenix Coyotes to the New York Islanders to the Winnipeg Jets to the Florida Panthers, then the Montreal Canadiens, and the Edmonton Oilers. And the one hint that I will give you right off the hop, because it kind of makes it tough for you if I don't, is that this player did not start his career in 2008 playing on the team that drafted him in 2004. So do not think that he was a Coyotes draft pick.
Well, I'm quite sure that the Coyotes' first round pick in 2004 was Blake Wheeler. So it's not him.
It's very far from Blake Wheeler.
Yeah, and now like this is where yeah, this is where this is going to get tough.
Oh, it's going to be really tough. I'd be surprised if you got this one.
Yeah.
In 2008, he played his first NHL games with Phoenix, but he was drafted in
Okay,
2004.
by somebody else. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that changes it because I thought it was I'm looking for a Phoenix pick that made his debut with the Islanders. So that
Mm-mm.
I'm a lot less hopeless now, but you're still telling me this is hard, so I will have to.
Yeah, bro, he played 5 games with the Coyotes, so don't worry about remembering him in a
Okay,
Coyotes
there you
jersey.
go. Islanders, Jets, Panthers, Canadians, Oilers.
And the only reason I deem this one fair is because you probably should have and would have seen this player play.
No, I'm stuck on. Well, you know what helped me here, and I think helped me get it.
You think you have it?
I think I do because I'm looking at that 2004 pick and I'm looking at that 2008 start date and I'm saying to myself, why would a 2004 draft pick? Because you mentioning that made me think of the top players in that draft. I got to Blake Wheeler at 5. Al Montoya was 6th. I don't remember who had the 6th pick in that year. I don't know who he was drafted by. I couldn't tell you that, but it's checking the Islanders, the Panthers, Canadians, and Oiler boxes. I do not remember him in Winnipeg specifically, but I believe you. So that's who I'm going to say it is.
Ding, 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 ding,
That's
ding.
good.
Al Montoya was drafted by the Rangers 6th overall in 2004. He was a pretty sick goalie prospect back in the day.
Yeah, well, and Dubnik was the other 2004 goalie first rounder that I thought of that definitely also checked the Oilers box, but there was no Wild on this list.
I was
So,
very, very careful with my words and I didn't say goalie very, very clearly. I even
yeah.
said player multiple times.
No, yeah, and it was the delay of it was you drawing attention to the draft and then the delay of the career starting that helped.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice work, man. Very nice work. I honestly didn't think you were going to get it, but I think the hint might have got it for you. And without that hint, I think you may have been very stuck.
I definitely would have because I couldn't think of another pick that Phoenix would have had other than Blake Wheeler that year. Um, but then it was the pick after Wheeler that was Montoya. So there you go.
Well, nice work on that one, fella. I want you to think of one unique piece of trivia for me next week, something you haven't thought of before, like a different style of game. And then maybe give me a career trajectory or finish that trade, something simple that we usually do.
Okay, yeah, that'll be a next week promise. By the way, we didn't open this podcast today talking about players who wore the number of episode it is. So before we finish with what movie you've watched this week or movies plural, Number 48 in the NHL. Ole Levy wore 48 in his short stint with the Vancouver
I
Canucks.
knew you were gonna say that.
Yeah. 48.
Thomas Hurdle is the most notable one in recent memory.
Is Jordan Martinook 48? I got a feeling.
He very well might be.
Yeah.
Very well might be. Tyler Kennedy.
I remember him. He was solid. He was a very solid middle six player for those Pittsburgh Penguins teams.
Very early on, Mr. Danny Briere.
Right. Oh, of course. Yeah, in Philly.
Yeah,
He was 48 in
yeah,
Philly and
yeah,
Montreal, I think.
yeah. I'm looking through the list now because I've only named the ones that I thought of. Apparently Morgan Frost is 48. I didn't know that.
I yeah, I don't know.
Or at least he was. That's I think that's all I've got. Yeah, that's all I've got. There's a lot of people on this list that I haven't heard of. So
Matt Grzelcyk in Boston, I think. He's a very
okay, okay.
underappreciated. Yeah.
There you
Anyways,
go.
forgot
Well,
to say
speaking of
that.
movies, we haven't done the movie thing in a while, and I want to get back to that one because I often watch movies. And I think for me, I did a rewatch of a fantastic movie, and then I watched a new movie that was complete garbage just because for some reason it was free and it got pumped to me in advertising so much. And I like dumb popcorn movies sometimes, but it sucked. I watched that Sydney Sweeney Glenn Powell movie, and I watched it with a couple of friends at the end of a night, and like we shut it off halfway through because it was so dumb. And then I went back to finish it like a night later, thinking, this sucks. And I actually managed to fall asleep twice in the 40 minutes before the end of it, which is very rare for me. I don't often fall asleep during movies. So yeah, that movie sucks. Don't watch it. Unless your girlfriend or wife or significant other wants to watch it, and then you just sit through it and make sure you have good snacks and just pick a good spot on the wall to look at. And you'll be fine. Um, but I also rewatched Interstellar with my dad last night. That movie is both in my top 10 favorite movies of all time and possibly the best movie I've ever watched. From the acting to the casting to the visuals to the CGI
The
to
score.
oh my God, the score.
Yeah.
I've listened to that score while writing news to stay focused. Like top to bottom, it is masterpiece level. Like the cornfield chase. Oh my God. Oh my God. And then just the one thing that it captures so incredibly well is one of the most natural things in the human mind, the curiosity to find something more, something beyond what we know and we have seen. Like, I think the element of discovery is something that was really lost on a lot of this generation, where we don't really see that as much. Like, in the 60 years before we were born, like, space was just such a fascinating thing we knew so little about. What we did know, a lot of it has been corrected since then. Like, and there's still so little we know. Like we know like a grain of sand on the grand scheme of things. Like we are a pebble compared to everything else out there. So I mean like I love the idea of exploration, so that one will always resonate with me so much. And then just like the plight of the father wanting to get home, and like and you see Matthew McConaughey's character get to the end and he sees his daughter and she's like on her deathbed at the end of her life. It's just like the most insane thing. Then to top it off, Christopher Nolan's usage of time is just like the most like perplexing, mind-boggling, interesting thing ever.
And not just in that movie, by the way. Like it's in
Oh yeah.
time is clearly that man's like muse, right? Like
Yeah.
without any shred of a doubt. Because it's in like even Oppenheimer, which tells a story that doesn't really, that doesn't really have time as an element in the plot, is flipping back and forth between obviously the um, Louis Strauss's Senate confirmation hearing and then J. Robert Oppenheimer's building of the bomb. But think about every Christopher Nolan movie. Like the Batman ones didn't really have too much in it. I'll get to the Prestige because I just watched it for the first time. It'll be one of mine. But Inception absolutely has
Oh,
a
oh,
big time element. Memento is all about,
yep.
putting that story together, and the Prestige had an element of it too. And I guess I'll take over then. I'll segue to the Prestige. Um, I've started just giving my movies like an out of 100 rating.
Okay.
Um, because I find like out of 10, I just have too many eights or too many sevens or whatever, right? Like this differentiates a little bit more. Prestige, James, I give it a 93 out of 100. I loved this
Ooh.
movie. It was so good. The dialogue, the story. I said to one of my best friends, that is one of the, if not the best screenplay I've seen in a movie. Like just
Hmm.
everything about it was so good. I love the third act. Like the climax of the movie was excellent. The other one I've watched recently, I gave it an 82 out of 100, which is still a glowing compliment. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by David Fincher. It was a
Oh, hell yeah.
Stieg Larsson novel that was adapted again. The story and the dialogue, Rooney Mara in her supporting, or I guess she was leading in that. She had enough screen time to be a leading actress. She was
It was like a
incredible in that movie.
co-lead with her and Daniel Craig.
It was, yeah, and she was awesome. And then I will get to the last of them. Much like you, I have two new ones I watched and one that I rewatched. I had such a renewed and like profound appreciation for watching Manchester by the Sea again. I loved it
Yeah.
way more than the first time I watched it. The first time I watched it, it was like the it's hard. Like Anton Chigurh by Javier Bardem in No Country for Old Men, Christoph Waltz playing Hans Landa in Inglorious Bastards, Casey Affleck playing Lee Chandler in Manchester by the Sea is up there in my favorite acting performances ever. It's incredible. Um, it's a very heart wrenching movie, but it's quite good.
That
I
actually brings me to something I was talking about with a friend of mine. I think Casey Affleck really rips us off because he's like one of the greatest actors of our generation, but he's so picky. So he barely does anything. And like that's why some of them are so great, but like he had like 20 minutes of screen time in Interstellar, and he was so good. It was like an emotionally wrenching performance in that 20 minutes. Yeah, man. I have not seen Gone Baby Gone, and that is at near the top of my list of movies that I have to see. I'm sorry, I like Ben Affleck, but his younger brother Casey blows him out the water.
Yeah, he does. I gave Manchester by the Sea a 96 out of 100 the second time I watched it.
Is that your highest?
No, it's in like it's definitely well within. It might be in the fifth of five in the top five.
What's your highest?
Inglorious Bastards at a 98, I think.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
I haven't rewatched that one in about 8 or 9 years, so maybe I'll give it another go.
Yeah, again, I said it. Christoph Waltz's Hans Landa is quite good, and there's an element of that movie being quite funny as well at some points, despite the subject matter. Like Brad Pitt gives a solid performance and very well at times the comic relief that he brings is quite good. I One of the funniest like I just laughed so hard moments when the first time I watched that movie when um third act when they are in the theater, Brad Pitt as Lieutenant Aldo Rain and his other the bastards, the people in that group with him. And he tries to speak Italian to Hans Landa, and he has the most abhorrent accent in the world. It's hilarious, and it's so funny. I love it.
Okay, one last little movie thing before we call it quits. What was the first movie that you saw Christopher Waltz play a villain in?
Uh, that one, yeah, that one has to be.
The Green Hornet. That's the first one I saw him in because I didn't see Inglorious Bastards for a couple years until after it came out.
I don't think I've seen the Green Hornet.
It kind of holds up in being funny action comedy. It's pretty good.
Okay.
It's a
Interesting.
fun watch. It's a good popcorn movie.
Okay.
He
Okay.
plays a villain named Chudnovsky. So go enjoy some Chudnovsky. That's your assignment for the week. Um, yeah, this has been a fun one. Hope you guys all enjoyed as much as we did, and we will catch you in the next one. So without further ado, let's roll that outro. Thanks, guys.